A couple words about Zoom etiquette, and also an informative piece that we are recording this and we are broadcasting this on Facebook Live and on YouTube. If you do not wish to be broadcast in that way, there's a couple things that you can do. One is you can turn off your video. And the second is that you can change your name on the Zoom and just simply put anonymous. And then that way, your privacy, if you so desire, can be respected. We are going to be controlling the sound for the program, meaning that we're going to be muting everybody's microphone so that if there's any background noise or if there's a distraction, we're going to be able to keep that to a minimum. When we come to the question and answer period, and even before then, if you'd like, you can type your question into the chat. If you go to the toolbar of Zoom, you'll either see a button called chat, or there might be three dots underneath, and underneath those three dots would be the word more. There you'll see the chat, and you can just type right into the chat your question. And we'll ask that question of Professor Berk on your behalf. We know that many people are aware, and we're aware that sometimes when we do these kinds of programs and we have a broad publicity to encourage people to come, including, as I understand, someone who's joining us from Cleveland, Ohio this evening. When that happens, there's always the possibility that there might be some bad actors that are joining us. You should know that we're prepared for that. Should that happen, we're just going to stop talking and we're going to allow our team to identify which microphone that is and to remove those microphones from the Zoom. So if that happens, please be patient. Believe it or not, it takes less than 30 seconds to take care of that. But when you're living through it, it's a very long 30 seconds. So I just wanted to let people know that as well. I think that's really all I have to say in terms of the welcome and the thank you. And of course, the most important thank you that we want to make is to the Kurtzner family. Professor Berk is no stranger to Toronto and certainly no stranger to Beth Tzedek. His relationship with us goes back more than 30 years, and that's really all thanks to the Kurtzners and their commitment to Jewish education and to high quality education, such that Professor Berk, who's a noted historian, and the Harry and Sally Schaefer Professor of Holocaust Studies at Union College, is able to join us every year. We have from the Kurtzner family a video to show as an introduction, a video to show as an introduction, and we thank the Kurtzners for that. So Dania, when you're ready, please roll the video.
Good evening. I'm Michael Kurtzner, and on behalf of my family, including my parents Max and Dolly here in Toronto and my uncle Lou in Vancouver, thank you for joining us tonight as our family is pleased to present, and in association with the UJA Foundation of Toronto, our scholar in residence, Professor Stephen Berk. My family also joins with me in offering a personal message of support at this difficult time to our frontline healthcare workers and government leaders who continue to strive to keep our community safe and healthy. We wish a speedy recovery to those suffering and think of those who have unfortunately passed, because our teachings remind us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. We also want to mention our clergy and spiritual leaders of all faiths who continue to provide us with pastoral care, concern, and support at this difficult time. Tonight, my family remembers three special people whose name bear the title of this annual lecture. My grandparents, Sam and Sarah Kurtzner of blessed memory, arrived in Canada so close to 90 years ago. They saw in Canada at that time a country of dreams and hope. And like many families that immigrated here in the darkest hours of the Depression in the 1930s, they became part of the fabric of Toronto, and they bore witness to wars and recessions and conflicts, and their voices and leadership helped our community find its way. My grandparents taught us that caring about the community was good, that family meant no one got left behind or forgotten, and that being involved in our community was an honorable endeavor. They led always by example and expected their future generations to do the same. In their generation, they made a real difference. Tonight, we also remember my late Uncle Joe Kersner, who would eagerly look forward to these lectures. Uncle Joe followed in his parents' footsteps as a community leader, which included being president of Bethesda Congregation, something he was very proud of. He was an innovator with great ideas, both in business and in philanthropy. And he was authentic and real. And members of our community will still remember his honesty, no matter whom it might have offended. And he lived with a simple belief: if you owe debts, pay debts. If honored, then honor. Give respect, then receive respect. Uncle Joe, much like my grandparents, believed that together as a community, we are much stronger than the sum of our parts. And this has never been more important than the present. May their memories always be for a blessing. Tehei nafshot atsurot betsurot achayim. Good evening to you in Roberta, in upstate New York, Stephen. It was written by your pioneers in the darkest days of the American Revolution. The times have found us. And so true today. The times have found us in this worldwide pandemic, scared and challenging hope. The times confused how we see our future in relationship to history, and perhaps your teachings this evening might help point a spotlight on the road ahead. For over 30 years, your teachings have been meaningful and timely. And while you might be a bit disappointed that your fellow classmate of years gone by, Bernie Sanders, has dropped out of the race for president, no doubt you will have many future lecture topics to educate us on, including the upcoming 2020 election. Stephen, as always, you will remind us tonight, and with your apparent ease, in helping us understand our history, but not falling victims to it. We really look forward to your lecture this evening.
Professor Berk, if you please, the calm, so to speak, is yours.
Good evening, my friends in Toronto. I wish I could be there personally with you, but of course, that is not possible. I wish you in Toronto, I wish all of Canada good health and good luck. Does the sun come up in the morning? Sometimes if you're in Toronto or you're in Schenectady in upstate New York, it seems that the sun will never come up. But it is inevitable that the sun does in fact come up. If there is a plague or a catastrophe anywhere else, anywhere on the planet, you can bet your last dollar that the Jews will be blamed for it. This is one of those axioms of history. Always blame the Jews in times of plague and times of catastrophe. This phenomenon began, one could say, 300 years before the Common Era, when the Egyptian priest, a man by the name of Manetho, M-A-N-E-T-H-O, Manetho said he must have been familiar with our scriptures, because what he said was, God didn't take the Jews out of Egypt, didn't take the Hebrews out of Egypt. The Egyptians threw the Hebrews out of Egypt because the Hebrews had leprosy. And the Egyptians were, justifiably from his perspective, the Egyptians were delighted. They had to get the Jews out or the leprosy would spread to them. More consequential, of course, leading to an enormous number of deaths, was the Black Plague, the Black Death, the bubonic plague that existed in Europe between 1347 and 1352. It is estimated that 40% of the European population died. And amongst those 40%, or within the 40%, we believe that 200,000 Jewish men, women, and children died. Yet with all of this, with all of the Jewish suffering, as well as the general suffering, the charge was made during the period of the Black Death, it's the Jews who are responsible The Jews who were poisoning the wells. The Jews practiced witchcraft. It was, again, it led to decimation. It led to what we would call later on a pogrom or many pogroms. And it led, incidentally, for those who are interested in the long range or the perspective of Jewish history, it's going to lead to a massive flight of Jews from Western and Central Europe to the eastern part of the continent. And that we will see, if we had more time, that's going to be really the birth of the Polish Jewish community, which eventually would be the largest Jewish community in the world for a certain period of time. Following that, we of course there are other times, cholera, again, would strike Europe. And once again, one would hear charges that the Jews were responsible. And then where it really gets bad and very, very, let us say, catastrophic, is in the period between 1914 and 1920. I'll begin by, of course, the charge by many Germans that we would have won the war, that our gallant and valiant soldiers were on the brink of victory. But they didn't achieve victory because the Jews stabbed them in the back. It's the Jews who are responsible for the German defeat. It's the Jews that were responsible for, let us say, the harsh treatment that was meted out to Germany at the Congress of Versailles in 1919. And almost simultaneously, within Russia and among Russian exiles in Paris and London, Washington, New York, all over the world, Russian exiles who were supporters of the Tsarist government, who benefited or members of the old regime, they blamed the accession to power of Lenin and the Communist Party on the Jews. The Jews did it. The Jews were responsible for bringing the communists to power. Judaism and communism, they argued, were synonymous. Moreover, where they really stuck it to the Jews, and really it did resonate among some Russians, was that the Jews were responsible for the murder of the Tsar, the Tsarina, and really all of the remaining members of the Romanov dynasty. The Jews would be blamed for that. And then in my own country, Reverend Louis Farrakhan would argue that the Jews were responsible for spreading AIDS, for spreading narcotics, for spreading all sorts of evils within the African-American community. And finally, I must tell you with great sadness, because this brings us right up to the present, in Turkey and Iran, two Islamic countries, the media again and again present or depict a situation in which the Jews are responsible for the spreading of the coronavirus, that the Jews want to destroy the economies of the world, that it is because of Israel that the coronavirus has spread. It is a phenomenon that occurs or reoccurs again and again and again. How do we explain this? I must tell you as a precautionary note, for those who have heard me speak before, I always make the point. History is not mathematics. It is not science. You cannot say A plus B produces C. So when I give you my answers, I take them with I must say to take them with a grain of salt. Never suspend your own rational thinking. If you don't like what I say, if you think I'm wrong in some of the things that I say, please, in the question and answer period, say what you will. Please question me as tightly as you can. I would begin by saying to you that many of the problems experienced by Jews, particularly in times of plague and catastrophe, have to do with early Christian teachings about the Jews. That is teaching number one. These are what historians refer to as the basic teachings of contempt. Judaism at the time of the appearance of Jesus was spiritually bankrupt. That's the story in the New Testament, in which the Jews are accused again of changing money right near the Holy of Holies. Look at the Jews, says the early church. Look at them. They're changing a buck. All they're interested is in money and material things. In reality, as Christian as well as Jewish scholars know, in reality, there had to be money changes in the vicinity of the temple. People were coming from all over the diaspora, all over the Galut, to offer sacrifices at the temple. They had to change the currency of their countries into the currency of Judea. And then the most important charge of them all. Homicide is murder, a terrible crime. Parricide, the killing of a parent, is worse. Regicide, the killing of a king, is worse than that. But according to the early church, and indeed according to the church down until Vatican II in the 1960s, the Jewish people then and the Jewish people now are guilty of the greatest crime that has ever been perpetrated on the planet. they killed God's only son. Again, Christian and Jewish historians today would agree the depiction in the Gospels is simply not accurate. No Roman procurator or governor was ever going to tell or ask the people in a conquered province who should live and who should die. And then the third charge, and that is the argument that God was so angry at the Jewish people that he destroyed the temple and led, of course, forced the Jewish people into the diaspora. That too is not true. In fact, the diaspora had been created hundreds of years before. So what is going to take place is when a people is held in contempt for a long period of time, a folklore develops about them. By that I mean, you'll see it in the woodcuts in medieval Europe. Jews with horns, Jews with tails, Jews with different sexual organs than other people, Jews with different sexual proclivities. And of course, the worst of the folklore, because it leads directly to death for large numbers of Jews and expulsion for even larger numbers of Jews, is going to be the twin ideas of ritual murder and host desecration. Ritual murder is the idea that at the time of Passover, Jews kidnap Christian boys and girls, drain the blood from their body, and use it for the baking of the unleavened bread, the matzah. This is a nonsensical charge. It cannot be proven because it never existed. And then there was the charge of host desecration. In Catholicism, when the priest says a prayer over the wafer, consecrates the wafer becomes the body of Christ, and the wine, after he says a prayer, becomes the blood of Christ. This is what is known as transubstantiation. I'm not giving you a lecture in theology, I'm simply telling you that what's going to happen by the time we get to the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries is that anti-Jewish sentiment, later racial anti-Semitism, is embedded in Western civilization. That's the crucial point, that hostility to the Jews, going back 1,500 years, depending on where you take your point of reference, 1,500 years, 1,800 years, 2,000 years. The Jews are in and again, hostility towards the Jews, is embedded. It's part of Western civilization. So why should anyone be surprised that in times of catastrophe, in times of plague, when people are looking for not simple answers, you could say simple answers, but they're looking for answers, which of course would in reality would be very, very complex. But they're looking for answers. They're looking for one thing that will explain the difficult times in which they are living. Why should, again, forgive me for repeating myself, why should anyone be surprised that people will look and use the Jews as a scapegoat? In addition to that, there's something else. I'm conscious of the words that I am using. And by that I mean, there is an intellectual beauty and coherence to anti-Semitism. There really is. The beauty, again, if you're an anti-Semite, the beauty of anti-Semitism is that it explains multi-causal phenomena in a monocausal way. I will say that again. The coherence, the intellectual beauty of anti-Semitism is contained in the fact that it explains multi-causal phenomena in a monocausal way. There are many things, many reasons to why things happen, but if you focus on the Jews, you've got yourself a good answer. A German socialist by the name of August Bebel, that is leading the SPD, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, in the 1880s and the 1890s, was so upset that right-wing, that reactionaries were able to, let's say, woo a certain segment of the working class, the proletariat. This was, of course, the target of the Marxist movement, the Social Democratic Party. And so what does he say? He understands what's happening. He says that anti-Semitism is the socialism of fools. That is, the right wing in Germany was able to use anti-Semitism as a weapon to explain depressions, to explain all sorts of problems within Germany. Now, after I've said all of this to you, this implies that masses of people really believed in this type of thing. And the answer is they really did. Again, I'm telling you what I tell the students on the first day of every class that I teach at Union College. Perception is reality. It's not important what really happened or what the real causes of something are. What is important is what people believe. So if people believe that the Jews killed Jesus, that's important. If people believe that the Jews are responsible for a plethora of evils, again, that's what is important. So in the period, there's no question that large numbers of people in their gut, for want of a better word, better expression, they really believe this. But it would be a mistake to think that many of these attacks upon the Jews, many of these accusations against the Jews, erupted spontaneously from large numbers of people. Once again, masses of people truly believed that the Jews are responsible for whether Black Death, loss in the war, and so on. But it is also true, historians have found, and they found it for quite some period of time, that in many cases, there were people who were not from the masses, people in the government, people in the church, the intellectual elite, who for a variety of reasons used anti-Semitism as a political, economic, and social weapon, and therefore manipulated the psyches of the masses of people. I am not saying to you, as an American political scientist once said, the masses are asses. I am not saying that. That is not my point. I am saying to you that in a time and a place where the overwhelming majority of the population, like 98% of the population, was illiterate, the ideas, these hostile ideas to the Jews, because of the fact that anti-Jewishness was, again, embedded in Western civilization, would find fertile soil. But I come back to the fact that there were people out there that manipulated the masses and used anti-Semitism as the weapons that I have been taught in the ways that I have been talking about. Again, they understood that anti-Semitism was an effective weapon because it explained multicultural phenomena in a monocausal way. So let me begin with the Black Death. The Jews will be blamed for X, Y, and Z. I already went over this. Now, people in authority would use the Jews as a scapegoat, using it as to deflect animosity away from them. That happens all the time. They were worried about, those people in authority, they were worried that the masses would accuse them of being inept in dealing with the catastrophe. So they would, of course, blame the Jews. And then we come, of course, to the various epidemics, the cholera epidemic. The Jews did it. No government, remember, these are, you could argue, natural phenomena. That is a catastrophe, whether it's a famine or war, not so much war, but famines, for example, and diseases and plagues. These are natural phenomena. Governments cannot be blamed for them, but they can be blamed for their reaction to them. And in order to deflect growing opposition and animosity away from them, they will blame things on the Jews. So let me go. Let me go right back. Let's go to World War I. Germany was defeated November 11th, 11 o'clock. Every Canadian knows this, at 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, Germany was forced to sign an armistice. The German people had been told for months, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Victory is around the corner. Our gallant soldiers, one last push, one last offensive, which began on March 21st of 1918. One last offensive, and our soldiers will reach the Channel coast, and the British and French will really surrender before the Americans get there in such force. We didn't do it, said German generals after the war. We couldn't do it because the Jews stabbed us in the back. The reality of the matter was, Germany was defeated on the field of battle. That is, the British Empire was too strong for Germany. The Americans were pouring 300,000 men each month into Europe. The Germans really, by the spring of 1918, it could truly be said, the expression at that time was, Germany had shot her bolt. But again, for the generals who conducted the war, for the government, the Kaiser's government, they would all argue, we would have won the war. Don't blame us. Don't blame the army. Don't blame the Kaiser. Don't blame the existing, let us say, right-wing or conservative institutions in Germany. We would have won the war if the Germans had not stabbed us in the back. And the same thing you could argue, again, with the Bolshevik Revolution. Bolshevism and communism are synonymous. It's one and the same. What those who charged that the Jews brought about the revolution They were covering up for a stupid Tsar, for a Tsar who was so reactionary, who would not make any concessions, who was a vicious anti-Semite. They were covering for him. They were covering from their own ineptitude in governing Russia before February of 1917. That's the when the Tsar and the Romanov dynasty was overthrown. So, covering up their own ineptitude, who do you blame? You blame the Jews. It all would have been all right. Lenin and the Communist Party would never have come to power in October of 1917 if, in fact, really if it weren't for the Jews. And then Reverend Farrakhan. Farrakhan was and is trying to use anti-Semitism as a weapon to mobilize large numbers of African Americans. He is mistaken. That is, he does have tens of thousands of followers. Maybe he even has a few 100,000 members of followers. But his work and his propaganda has not really seeped into really the overwhelming majority of the African American population. What he is trying to do, nobody who has a decent bone in his or her body can deny that historically the African American population or African Americans in my country have suffered a great deal. Even in our own time, when there's no legal discrimination, when Blacks are entering the ranks of the middle class, AIDS spreads in the Black community, narcotics spreads in the Black community. And Farrakhan and his followers, they blame it all on the Jews, as they in fact blame slavery on the Jews. It is, of course, absolute nonsense, but I'm trying to show you that again and again, it is convenient for some people, for some political movements, for some religious ideologies, to attack the Jews again and again and again. And then we come right to the present. In Iran and in Turkey, we see social media and various newspapers in both countries espousing the idea that the Jews were the ones who were responsible for the coronavirus, that the Jews want to destroy Islam, that the Jews want to achieve hegemony all over the planet. And they will argue it is precisely Israel, the land of the Jews, that is doing all of this. Now, why is it that many people will believe this in the Islamic world? Here we have to go back. Just as I told you in dealing with Christian Europe, you can see the roots of this hostility to the Jews in Christian teachings about the Jews. I'm saying to you that you can really see the roots of Islamic hostility towards the Jews, really to a certain extent in the Quran. But one has to be fair. There are some very nice statements about the Jews in the Quran, but there are also some very unfortunate statements about not trusting Jews. The Jews are apes and monkeys. And of course, there's also the Hadith. These are the supposed teachings of Muhammad. Even Muslim scholars will deny that many of the Hadith, many of the sayings of Muhammad were never said by Muhammad. But nonetheless, for many of the faithful in Islam, there is a belief that whatever is in the Hadith was in fact the words, these are the words of the Prophet Muhammad. The most famous of those Hadiths, which you hear from Hezbollah, which you hear from Hamas, which you hear from Islamic Jihad, and which you hear in Iran as well. Again and again you hear it. Let's run something like this. On Judgment Day, the tree will say to the Muslim, Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, kill him. And the rock on Judgment Day will say to the Muslim, Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, kill him. This type of thinking is going to lead to a reservoir of anti-Jewish sentiment within the world of Islam. Many people believe this. That is, you can say, how many? It's very hard to get accurate polling data here, but there is no question that many people do this. Even some liberals, such as those who write for the New York Times, have condemned the perversive anti-Semitism within the Islamic world. But once again, there is, of course, a group of people, governments, intellectuals, religious people, theologians, who are using the coronavirus and the charge against the Jews for spreading the coronavirus. They are using this as a weapon to weaken and perhaps even destroy the state of Israel. In other words, what I'm really saying to you in all periods of time, when there are accusations erupting or flowing from large numbers of people, from masses of people, there are always people who in their gut, in their hearts and their minds, they know it's all, forgive me for the colloquial expression, it's all a crock. They know it. They know it's not true, but they want to use it for their own political, economic, and social advantages. So it means in the Islamic world, and I must tell you in general, this is a different time from earlier periods of hostility or anti-Semitism. One of the reasons being is the change in technology. By that I mean, one of the reasons that the Black Death, or the ideas of the Black Death, and that the idea that the Jews were responsible for it, it's widespread in the 14th century, but in the 15th and 16th and 17th centuries, it will be even more widespread because of a technological development, and that is the invention of the printing press. The printing press means that people who have made these hostile statements write them down. Now the writings can be distributed all over the world, certainly all over Christian Europe. In our time, what the technological advance is, of course, what you and I are doing right now, working on the computer, working through Zoom, and of course, the social media that we all tune into on the iPhones and the other smartphones. Any jackass can get on, can make a podcast. Anybody can make a blog. There's no censorship. This is the weakness of a democratic society. And parenthetically, I will tell you, the government that uses it more than anyone else, not so much in dealing with Canada, but with the United States, is President Putin's Russia. Putin has found the weak spot in American society. It is the unfettered social media. Now, again, I'm not going off on a tangent. I just want to make the point to you. Nobody who's got a brain in his or her body can deny that the Russians meddled in the 2016 election and that they will meddle again in 2020. Fortunately for us, again, we can discuss this if you want in a chat. Putin does not espouse anti-Semitism. He does not use anti-Semitism as a political weapon. He uses other things as a political weapon. He makes other statements. But the point here is the social media, when it comes to blaming the Jews for X, Y, and Z, and in our time, blaming the Jews for the coronavirus, the social media is deadly. It is lethal. And that's going to present a problem in our time and really for the rest of our lifetimes and probably beyond. So here we are, plague, catastrophe, blamed historically going back over 2 millennia, blaming it on the Jews. The masses believe it, and other people manipulate the masses because they're using anti-Semitism as a weapon in order to advance their social, political, economic, and international interests. So after all of this, what is to be done? The Russians used to ask this question in the 19th century as they confronted the Tsarist autocracy. Что делать is the Russian expression. What is to be done? Let me say to you right at the beginning, no matter what we do, we will not eliminate this phenomenon of blaming the Jews for catastrophe and plague, nor will we ever eliminate anti-Semitism. Plato said, only the dead have seen the last of war. I'm here to tell you that only dead Jews have seen the last of anti-Semitism. Nonetheless, there are things that we can do. We must be alert. Any political leader, any intellectual, any leader of a religious group that espouses, that really talks about anti-Semitism, uses anti-Semitism as a weapon, must be called out. We must never, never be afraid. Both you and I, we live by the grace of God and by sheer luck. We live in magnificent democratic countries. There is no room for that type of thinking, and there is no reason why people like us, the Jews, who are under the gun sometimes from some of these bad people, we have to speak out. Every letter to the editor that is hostile to the Jewish people, that accuses Jews of X, Y, and Z, should be counted. Every idiot who calls into a talk show should also be counted. These are important things. And then, again, because we live in democratic countries, we must enter into the marketplace of ideas. Again, I'm saying to you, forgive me for repeating myself, there's no way we can eliminate all of these things. But what we can do in the marketplace of ideas is to explain civilly and rationally why certain things are taking place. So when Jews are accused of spreading the coronavirus, we get on there and say, well, that's inconceivable. It is impossible. Nobody concocts a virus. We don't do that. Not only Jews, nobody does it. Canadians don't do it. Americans don't do it. Nobody does it. And I don't believe the Chinese have done it. My own feeling on this is it was an accident. Something got out of a lab and so on. But there's no way of proving that. I do not believe that the Chinese deliberately fabricated a virus, constructed a virus to destroy the rest of the world. I don't believe that. But I'm saying to you, we've got to enter into the marketplace of ideas. And I think, because in democratic countries, I think, again, I'm saying to you, the masses are not asses. Most of our compatriots are decent and good people. These are people that will not respond to these illogical attacks upon Jews or upon any other group. Yes, there will be people in Canada. Yes, there will be people in the United States, in France, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in the UK. Yes, there will be people who will feel that way, but not most of them. And our democratic institutions will stand firm. So what I'm saying to you is that we may confront difficult times, difficult charges against us, charges that we are prone to laugh at. We shouldn't laugh at it. We should counter them in any possible way that you can think, some of the ways I have suggested. If we do this, I am confident that our democratic societies will not only survive, and together with the Jews who live in these countries, the Jews and democracy will survive and thrive. Succinctly put, I'm telling you, my friends, to use the language of our co-religionists, our brothers and sisters in the state of Israel, yeh tov. In the end, it will be good for the Jews and for the democratic countries in which we live. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. One of the things I always appreciate about your presentation is the very direct way in which you say some of these things. There's no room for doubt as to both the way in which you structure the facts and the evidence, but also the conclusions that you draw. I suppose while we're waiting for people to populate their questions in the chat, I'll ask the first question. Though I certainly agree with the long view of Jewish history that Gamza Yavor, this too will pass and we have to get through it and so forth. Sometimes it's very frustrating when you're in the midst of it to be living through it. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on the fact that this comes in waves and histories, ups and downs, and certainly at traumatic paradigm shifting moments in history, Jews make a convenient scapegoat. But yet, as the people that are the recipients of all that hate and anti-Semitism, sometimes it can be really wearing. I'm just wondering what you would say to inspire people in the moment to continue to be able to push back against this for the long term.
I would say two things. One I already said, and that is we have to have faith, strength in our confidence in our compatriots and in the governments and the democratic institutions that we have. And I must tell you that the difference between now and a very bad time, let's say in the 1930s, the Jews confronted a situation where governments, not only with large numbers of people, ordinary people hostile to the Jews, but governments were hostile to the Jews. That is not the case now. So I think one, I already mentioned this for the third time now, confidence in our institutions. And then, Rabbi, I think I have mentioned this before in other places, and I think at Beth Tzedek. We have a glorious tradition, whether one is a believer or not. If I were on the bima at Beth Tzedek, I would turn, as I have turned in the past, I would turn in the direction of the Torah, of the Ark. And I would say to people, and I speak as someone who is fairly traditional in beliefs, I would say, you may think everything in there is a bubamaitza. Everything is a fairy tale. But that's the genius of our people. Torah and Talmud and a myriad of writings. This is the genius of our people. We contributed so much to humanity in so many ways. The first giant steps were not taken in Shanghai. They were not taken in India. They were taken in the Sinai. This idea of ethical monotheism. This is our idea. This is our contribution. People should be, you want to steel yourself for the bad times? Again, have confidence in the societies in which we are in, and also immerse yourself in the Jewish tradition, and that will strengthen us no matter what comes.
Let me just take a moment here to look. If anyone has a question, we encourage you to please write it in the chat. Give people a second to find the chat and to look for it. All right. Oops, hold on, here comes something. So here's a question. COVID-19 is changing many aspects of life. Yesterday, Barry Weiss of the New York Times identified 5 big questions that she believes will be in play. Big questions: how to protect the American dream, how to balance global and national needs, can science in fact prevail over politics, what is the role of technology, what is the future of urban life, will politics deal with real life? What are the big questions that you identify at this moment as an outcome of the virus?
What are the big questions? I must say to you that the question that I have on my mind, and the question that I think everybody who is listening has on their mind, when is this going to end? When are we going to be able to go back to work? I think there will be fundamental changes, but maybe I'm conservative with a small c. I believe that there will not be those great changes that people think. I think when all of this is over, people will come to the synagogues, people will go to the restaurants, people will hear lectures in place, and they will not rely on the way we are doing it now. So I think there are going to be changes. In my own country, I think one of the lessons that is going to be learned, because people are talking about it all the time, is that the outsourcing of crucial manufacturing has got to stop. That no country can leave itself bereft of an easy access to raw materials and to some manufactured goods. It is, to use the old language, it's a shanda that the United States, I cannot speak about Canada, but that the United States is so dependent upon China for the raw materials that are necessary for the testing kits and for all sorts of medications. That will come to an end. I do think, although in a capitalist society, manufacturing or companies are always driven to go to the place where labor costs are less. Nonetheless, this time I think the government and the American people will really push for bringing some of these things back. I think we will be more ready for the next one. If there's a second wave or a third wave, I hope there isn't, but I think we will, the United States, and I think Canada as well, will be better prepared. In terms of the international scene, that's a tricky one. On the one hand, we are a global village, we are interdependent, we're dependent on each other's, but nationalism has already risen and it will rise again as each nation does its best to protect its own interests. In terms of cities, in terms, I really don't know. I really don't know. She has framed, the writer from the New York Times has framed the right questions here. I think they're a little bit too vague. They're a little bit too large for any individual to deal with. I'm not waffling. My students accuse me of a multitude of sins. Waffling is never one of them. I simply do not know. I'm not a Novi. I'm not a prophet. I think I can see some of the things that are going to happen. I must tell you, from my parochial standpoint, one of the things that is really a question for all of us in academic life is what's going to happen in the autumn. Will the schools open up? Will the students come back? My own institution, I don't want to spin this out, my own institution is up against the wall. We have to repay at least $7 million for room and board for the students who are not coming. And the question that everybody is asking with the decline in the stock market, we're at a private institution. The full freight at Union College is $72,000 a year. Now we give out a ton of financial aid, but still students have to come up, or families have to come up with a large sum of money. And will families pay that money if they are told in the autumn that we are going to continue what we did in the spring? That is, are we going to go online? Is it worth it to pay a large sum of money to go to a school where the lectures are online? So these are some of the questions, again, forgive me for being parochial, these are the questions that I myself have to confront, and large numbers of other people have to confront as well.
Thank you, Professor. There's quite a few more questions that are coming up now. Let me just share with you a couple of them at a time. You've been talking about plagues, but to my knowledge, well, let me rephrase the question. Has there been blame suggested for COVID-19 from any country or from any people, and where has that blame been targeted? Another question is, how is this crisis different from others that you talked about, if at all? And then the third that I think relates to this a little bit is, have pandemics in history brought about any enduring changes in the world, and what would those changes be?
All right, let me deal with the first one. If I remember correctly, what countries are using this, making charges about the pandemic? Well, I already said Turkey and Iran have accused Israel and the Jewish community of really concocting the virus and spreading it. China has accused not the Jews, but the United States. And remember, in these countries, there's no freedom of the press. There's no freedom of the press. So although the government may not say it, nothing like this could have been published without the approval of the government. So the Chinese are, again, accusing the United States as using, actually fabricating the virus and using it to weaken China. The Palestinian Authority has charged Israel with, again, not so much concocting the virus, but spreading the virus and depriving the Palestinians of what they need to deal with the virus. That's simply not true. The Israelis are doing all they can here, and the idea that they're deliberately spreading the virus is just nonsensical. But this is something we have been accustomed to. There was a charge 30 years ago, 25 to 30 years ago, that the Israelis were sending prostitutes into Egypt who had AIDS and were deliberately seducing Egyptian men in order to introduce AIDS into Egyptian society. Again, we live in a world where perception is everything and where people believe the most foolish of ideas. Every study we have indicates that a significant number of people in the Islamic world and people outside of the Islamic world believe that the attack on the Twin Towers was carried out by the Mossad, the Israeli Foreign Intelligence. That's a fact of life. It's a fact of life that people believe this. Now, the second question was, Rabbi, refresh my memory, please.
I have to refresh up mine too, hang on. Have pandemics brought about enduring changes in the world?
Yes, they have. In the aftermath of the Black Plague, there was devastation, and there was actually, after the plague, growing prosperity because there were fewer people to work large quantities of land. So there is no question, it has led to changes. It also leads, or pandemics, or let's say natural catastrophes, have led to political changes. So for example, in 1891, there was a terrible famine in Russia. The Tsarist government did not deal effectively with it. And there are historians who argue that's a nail in the coffin of the Romanov dynasty. As I said in my talk, you can't blame governments for natural phenomena. You can't blame them. Also, as you should not say, and I know to who I'm talking here, to say they're acts of God really, that's a cheap shot. God is not responsible for these things. But governments are measured and evaluated by the way they respond to these things. And so when there is when there is a depression, we will see this play out, I must tell you, this November, when the American people will evaluate, did President Trump act effectively in dealing with the coronavirus? So there are political changes all over the place. They always happen. Political, social, and economic changes. Now, why is this, if I remember a question, that why is this time, is there any difference this time than in the past? Well, the answer is yes. First of all, we have a more educated public. Not everybody has to go to college, but nearly everybody gets, almost nearly everyone gets a high school education. There are people who are, there's almost universal literacy. And the fact of the matter is, people can read things, they can think better, they have more information, they look at the facts, they can make their evaluations. Therefore, it's not, there's no herd mentality here, as there were in earlier pandemics. And finally, perhaps the most important reason of them all. If you live in a democracy, you are living in governments that will combat these conspiratorial ideas. Are there people in government that really believe in conspiratorial thinking? The answer is yes. But in every democracy that I can think of, the governments and most of the political parties, the major political parties, will not endorse this conspiratorial thinking and will not endorse anti-Semitism.
So I think the follow-up question, which has also been asked through the chat, and I know you said you weren't a prophet, and of course the conclusion of that sentence is, nor are you the son of a prophet. But how do you think the pandemic currently will impact the elections in November and also the Israeli political system? Those are the two questions that are really the follow-up questions.
All right, I thought I addressed the first question, how it will affect. I can't tell you that. I mean, President Trump has a base. The base will remain, whatever happens, whatever is happening, whatever will happen before November, the base will remain loyal to President Trump. Now, Karl Rove, the conservative political thinker, has argued you cannot win without your base. But it is also true, you can't win, you cannot win if all you have is your base. You must go beyond the base. President Trump, or candidate Trump, in 2016, was able to go beyond his base. It's astonishing to me that 39% of females in the United States voted for President Trump. But they did. I'm not bashing President Trump. I'm not bashing him. I'm simply saying to you, he was able to win because he went beyond that base that he had. The question is, can he go beyond that base now? In 2018, what took place was suburban women who had voted for him in large numbers in 2016 turned away from him in the congressional elections. College-educated people really turned away from him in 2018. What's going to happen? Can he reach out beyond his base? And then we have, you mentioned, of course, my classmate in high school, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, as everyone knows, is withdrawn. Bernie Sanders has a good deal of support. I just read a very interesting article about the 2016 election. 23% of Bernie Sanders supporters did not vote for Hillary Clinton. 23%. 12% voted for Trump. The others either sat it out or voted.
So Professor Berk has frozen for a minute there. Hopefully that'll come back. Um, so while we're waiting to see if he can rejoin us to finish the question and answer period, let me share with you a couple of upcoming opportunities to engage. We have on Mondays an ongoing series at 12:30 of conversations over coffee, in which I'm inviting interesting people to join me for 30 minutes of discussion and dialogue about any number of topics, but certainly discussion that's designed to stimulate our interest and also help us with resiliency and hope as we address the challenges of living with this crisis. On this Monday at 12:30, Adam Minsky, who's the president and CEO of UJA Federation of Toronto, will be joining me. And in future weeks, we'll have Neshama Karlibach, we'll have Nigel Savage, and others for that conversation. All that information is available on our website, www.beth-tzedek.org. On Yom Ha'atzmaut, during the day, I believe at 1 p.m., we have a really wonderful program that is co-hosted by the World Zionist Organization, by the Jewish Agency for Israel, by Beth Tzedek, by UJA Federation Toronto, by the Canadian Zionist Federation, by the American Zionist Federation, by Chat. Really just a very large global partnership in which Dr. David Breakstone, who is the deputy chairman of the Jewish Agency, and the intellectual inspiration and content behind the Herzl Museum that's on Mount Herzl in Israel, and David Matlow, who's a member of our congregation and a leader of the Jewish community here in Toronto, is chair of the Jewish Foundation in the Jewish Community Foundation. David Matlow is also has the designation of curating the world's largest collection of Herzl memorabilia. And so on Yom Ha'atzmaut, the two of them will be in dialogue with each other really around the world on Herzl's vision in 20/20, basically taking us through a journey both through history and through artifacts of the Zionist idea from the Basel platform to the Jerusalem platform. I'm just going to check. It's at 12 o'clock is the Yom Ha'atzmaut program. I do not see Professor Berk coming back, unfortunately. Perhaps there was an issue with his internet. But I want to thank everybody for their questions and for your participation, especially our partner synagogues. Thank you so much for for participating. And we also want to thank the Kersner family for their generous support every year for this program. We look forward to the opportunity of welcoming Professor Berk personally to the city and an opportunity to engage with him, not just spiritually, but also by being physically near as well. We hope that everybody stays home, stays healthy, stays safe, stays sane, and that we continue to support each other in important ways as we navigate through this crisis, but also remind ourselves of our core values of caring and community. Thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant evening. Shabbat Shalom.